Hey guys, good morning. Thanks for joining today. So we're gonna be doing a live brow lamination demonstration. So if you have any questions, of course, just pop them on there like always. I will try to answer them as I go. And if I don't get to any, I'll make sure to answer in the comments below. And if you miss this live, of course, watch it anytime and I'll continue to check the comments, or you can email me anytime at Paige, P-A-I-G-E, at panoplybeauty.com, okay? So I have my model set up. I'm gonna try to adjust my light here without my phone falling out. Okay. And so we haven't done anything yet, but Taylor does normally get her brows tinted. So she's used to the Elleebana or Belmacil brow tint. So you guys will kind of also be able to see how the tint, because she does have some tint left on her brows, how that reacts with the lift and then, or the lamination, and then how it ends up at the end, which will be a beautiful color, of course. Let me try to get this a little closer just so y'all have a better view. See how this works out for us. Okay, perfect. So the first thing I'm gonna do for Taylor is I'm gonna go ahead and cleanse the brow area just to make sure we get any oil, any kind of residual makeup. Taylor doesn't have makeup on today. But anything that could be on her skin, even like creams, SPF, anything like that, we want to make sure we get that off. So regardless if your client comes in with makeup on or not, you still need to do a thorough cleanse. And so I am just using the Elleebana Makeup Remover. It is a foam cleanser, super gentle, super easy to use, and it doesn't take a whole lot of it. And I'm just going to apply the foam right there to her brows. And you can see it looks like you have some tinted moisturizer on. A little bit of that's coming off. So I'm going to go over her brow area again until it kind of comes clean. And then I'll do the same thing to the other side. Now for today, for our brow lamination, we are using the Elleeplex Pro Fusion system. We would never use the one-shot system for a brow lamp. So you're gonna see the Elleeplex Pro Fusion system in action. And we have a whole blog and an entire video on storage of products. So if you need more information about that, go check it out on our YouTube channel or on panoplybeauty.com. But for the Pro Fusion sachets, we do want to store them in the fridge, but we want to make sure we take them out at least 30 minutes ahead of treatment time so they can go to room temperature. Because the Pro Fusion system, so I have these two little sachets out. The Pro Fusion system, the active ingredient in them is called CHC, or cysteamine hydrochloride, so it's a little different than the one-shot system. And that CHC actually requires some heat to activate, so you just don't want it to be cold. Typically, their body heat is going to be sufficient, especially when we use cling wrap. And I have this nice little brow lamination wrap box from Panoply. It's super convenient, so you don't have that huge roll of saran wrap. I use this. You guys can see that there. And that usually will trap in enough heat for the system to activate, or you could add like a dry warm towel on top of it, or even heated iPads if needed. All right, so first things first. I am just taking a look at Taylor's brows. And some things I want to know is the direction of her natural brow growth. At this point, you should have already done a client consultation to kind of see what your client has in mind with their brow lamination, whether they want those nice, big, full, fluffy brows, or maybe they just want them a little tidier, a little more kept. That's something you can ask during the consultation. What I'm really looking at with Taylor's brows is really 3 different parts, typically, is what I look at. So the head of the brow, here in the arch and the tail of the brow, and what direction the hair is growing in all 3 areas. So right here at the head of the brow, I see that her brow hairs are pretty much growing straight up, which is great. She can have that nice kind of fluffy look right there. Taylor does like bolder brows, so we'll tint her brows pretty dark today, dark for her hair color anyway. And then we're gonna try to redirect some of these more horizontal growing brows here in the body of the brow or in the arch. What I do wanna keep in mind is we never recommend repositioning a brow hair more than 45 degrees. So I don't wanna cause too much stress on the root of that hair by trying to make these brow hairs right in here also come straight up like the head of the brow. So I'm just gonna reposition them at a 45-degree angle as I'm working on Taylor. So what I have here is I'm first gonna use my Lift Lotion sachet, my Profusion Lift Lotion. I also have a 2-in-1 mixing dish, or you could just dispense it straight from the pack, the sachet, if you wanted to. That's personal preference. And what I like to use are these doe foot or disposable lip gloss applicators for application. And then I go back through with a Wonder Wand. They're these tiny little precise brow brushes or lash brushes that you can also find on Panoply Beauty. I go back through to really position the hairs how I want to. These are both disposable, which is great because less to wash and less to sterilize between clients. So I just toss them when I'm done. So I'm gonna go ahead and dispense my first lotion. And then I'm gonna start applying it to one brow. Now, the timings for our Profusion system, if you haven't worked with it before, are different from the one-shot system. When we are talking about brows, for finer brows, we're gonna do like 4 minutes lifting or laminating, 4 minutes setting. If they're kind of in between more average strength brows, you can do 6 and 6. And then for stubborn, really coarse hairs, you can do 8 and 6. Today on Taylor, I'm gonna do 6 and 6. And so what's really important to note is I'm gonna time each brow differently. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply my lotion to one brow. I'm gonna start my timer and then note how far the second brow is behind, or have 2 separate timers to keep track. Because anything down to a 15-second time difference can make a difference in your results. So you wanna make sure you're keeping 2 different timers, or just taking note of the time difference when you're laminating or lifting lashes. So I'm gonna go ahead, go in here and apply my lotion. And I'm gonna apply it pretty liberally. Some things I'm watching out for is I don't wanna get an excess amount of lotion on her skin. I'm only applying it to the brow hairs. And you may see some other brands recommending using some sort of barrier around the brows so the lotion doesn't irritate. What we recommend is just avoiding any excess areas of exposed skin that you can. So if I feel like I have lotion in areas I don't want it, I'm just simply gonna go back in with a dry Q-tip and clean that area up. It's as simple as that. Now this step 1 lotion's a little harder to see. You'll be able to see the step 2, the setting lotion, better during application. But I do have a really thorough application here of the step 1 lotion. And I wanna make sure I'm getting it all the way from the root to the tip. Okay, then I like to go back through with my brush and kind of stretch the brows out for this first step. So you can think of the laminating lotion as stretching these brow hairs out. And then the setting lotion is really kind of positioning them how you want them. So my goal with this first lotion is I am just stretching these brow hairs out So they can be fuller, or for some clients, maybe you're trying to hide gaps in their brows, whatever it may be. We're just stretching these hairs out. Okay, so now I'm gonna start my timer. And I'm gonna do 6 and 6 on Taylor. And I'm just cleaning up. This is just a dry Q-tip. So now I'm gonna take my Elleebana brow lamination wrap. Just cut off a little piece here. And gently apply it on top of her brows, try not to move anything around. So this cling wrap's here for a couple different reasons. Like we already talked about, it helps trap in that body heat to really activate that CHC and get the results that we want. It also kind of helps as a protective layer so you don't hit the hairs as you're working on the other brow, so they can laminate exactly like you want them to. All right, and then I'm gonna go into this other brow, her left brow, exactly like I did the first one. And so I'm applying the lotion first with a Stofa applicator. And then I'm gonna go back through with that same Wonder Wand and really position the brows how I want, or stretch them out. And you want to check with your client as you're working on them, make sure everything feels okay. Is everything good for you, Tay?
Yep.
Perfect. Because these lotions are touching the skin, since we're working on the brows, it can feel a little tingly to some clients. I've had some clients tell me it just feels like a cool, like almost mentholy feeling, but it shouldn't be too irritating to the skin as you're working on them. So there are some contraindications you would want to watch out for before a brow lam. You want to make sure they're not using like any retinols or acne medications topically before you do this, or that they at least stop it in an appropriate amount of time before they come in for a brow lamination. You want to make sure they don't have any cuts, abrasions in the area, anything like that that could cause some extra sensitivity. You want to be careful of. All right, and I'm gonna note this brow is about 2.5 minutes behind the first one. And then I'm gonna apply my cling wrap to that brow. Again, just gently trying not to move those brow hairs around too much, if at all. All right, so her right brow still has about 2.5 minutes left before we're gonna go in and remove. And all I'm gonna use for removal of this first step are just some dry Q-tips. I'm gonna go ahead and get those ready. Let me check and make sure y'all don't have any questions so far. It's hard to see it when I'm working. I see Kelly's on. Hey Kelly, you're welcome. Hope you guys are having fun at Vegas. They're at the show. I noticed that the first step is on for at least 1 minute while applying brushing before you set the timer. So would you take that minute off? Or is it 6 minutes from the time it's fully applied and brushed out? That's a great question, Lisa. So like we mentioned a little while ago, it's ideal to have 2 separate timers for each brow. But what you want to do is start your timer after you're finished applying to one brow. And it's the same way with a lash lift or lamination. You want to start your timer once you're fully finished applying to that eye. So I'm going to apply it to the brow completely and then start my timer. As far as starting it before or after I brush out with that Wonder Wand, it really just takes a matter of seconds to brush it out. So you can kind of do that either way. It's not a huge difference. Hope that helps. If you have any other questions about the timing, definitely drop them here and I'll answer them. I think that's all the questions we have so far. I have about a minute left before I'm going to remove Taylor's right brow lotion. So let me reposition the slide again. Make sure y'all can see. And just keep the questions coming if you have more questions about the brow lamination process. Okay, perfect. I do see questions quite often about if this is a service you can do on clients with thinner brows, finer brows, especially those clients who have probably already went through a lot of hormonal changes, maybe menopause, or even after having some kids and their brows just aren't the same. You can certainly do this service on any client, really. There's many different types of brows that would benefit from it. And because the profusion system is so gentle, you're not gonna damage the brows in the process as long as you stick to those recommended times. So I'm just gently wiping off the lotion. And again, these are just dry Q-tips. And what I'm not doing, I'm not scrubbing the brows. I'm wiping in the direction that they're now laying, because we don't want to add any extra tension to the hairs. As far as aftercare, we really want our clients to try not to touch their brows at all for the first 48 hours, the first 2 days. So that also goes for us as brow artists. We don't want to be in there scrubbing or applying any excess tension to the brow hairs as we're laminating them. All right, so that one's done. Over here, I still have about a minute and a half left. If you have 2 separate timers, you could go ahead and start applying that setting lotion to her right brow. I'm gonna wait because that just gets to be a little too much for me. So I wanna wait until this step's completely removed, and then I'll do the setting lotion to both brows, just like I did a little bit ago. What I do wanna do is kind of just brush through and see how the hair is stretched out with that step 1, and really see what I'm gonna go in here and do with my setting lotion. So Taylor has some really blonde, light colored brows right in here. You probably can't see them so well, especially after we did that laminating lotion. It stripped some of the tint off. But she does have some right in here. Like we already talked about, they are growing vertically, like directly straight up already. So we're gonna leave them like that. And then these brows, we're just gonna gently style at an angle. And remember, we're not doing more than 45-degree angle of styling. So they'll look something like that. All right, and then we're about to remove this side. And same thing, just dry Q-tips. I'm going in there and gently removing that laminating lotion. With the brow lamination, we don't want to use a lot of water in the removal process, if any. You can use some damp Q-tips after you remove step 2, the setting lotion. But that water can really kind of weigh down those brow hairs and reposition them in a way that we don't intend for them to be. So you're not going to do like a full-on rinse like you would in a lash lamination or lash lift. Okay, so it looks like this brow did really well too. So I'm going to go ahead and go in, get my little mixing tray. And we're going in with Elleebana setting lotion, step 2. And this one we are also going to allow to process for 6 minutes. Again, I just have a doe foot applicator, and I'm gonna do the same thing. Completely covering the brow hairs. You can get 2 brow laminations out of 1 set of sachets. I tend to usually use a whole one, so just get 1 client out of 1 set. But it depends on how coarse their hairs are, how thick their brows are. A lot of those kind of things go into play. As far as cost on your end, even if you're just getting 1 client out of a set of sachets, the cost is still super reasonable. And that's really what I think they are intended for, because they are sealed up individually, so you don't have any waste with the product. Okay, so once I have that covered, I'm going back through here with my Wonder Wand, and this time I'm really positioning the brows how I want them. Now once the service is done, it's not like we're cementing the brows in place. They are going to be flexible, they're going to be able to move, your client can style them, but this is kind of just encouraging the growth or the direction that you want them to go. So I'm just watching right here that I don't have too dramatic of a repositioned angle. I want to make sure all of my hairs are nice and neat and straight and none of them have any kinks in them. I'm going to go ahead and set my timer while I just finish these last few areas, making sure they're positioned like I want them. And then I'm going to go in with those dry Q-tips and clean up around her brow area, just to make sure the excess lotion is removed from her skin. And I'm going to apply more of my cling wrap. And this box seems like such a simple little addition to your service, but I'm just telling you right now, it's a huge time saver that I'm not having to cut all these little strips from a huge roll of cling film or saran wrap. And it's all neat in one little dispenser right there. That makes a huge difference. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing on the other brow. You want to make sure when you're applying that you're not wiping the lotion off in certain sections either, that you're really liberally applying it to all parts of the hairs from the root to the tip. And again, I'm just coming in and styling the brows in the direction I want them to be. I'm walking around kind of to the front of her so I can really get a good perspective. making sure all those hairs are brushed straight out. There's no kinks in them, so they'll lay like I want them to when we're finished. Then I'm going to go back in again and clean up with some dry Q-tips before I apply that cling wrap. And this brow, we're about 3 minutes behind this time. Okay, and so once Taylor is finished processing, I'm going to go straight in, and we recommend using the Elleeplex Profusion Tint System after brow lamination. It has the 2% oxidant instead of the normal 3 or 4% oxidant that most other tint lines have. And the reason for that is so it doesn't over process the hairs after we've laminated. That 3 or 4% oxidant isn't typically as big of an issue if you haven't done any other chemical process to the brows, but since we just laminated, we don't want to over process, so that 2% oxidant is really helpful. For Taylor, I am actually just going to use the light brown today. She still has some dark brown tint left in there because we tinted them not too long ago. And I have noticed just on someone who has a lot of warm undertones, Taylor has more of a strawberry blonde natural hair color, that when we're doing the brow lamination, it tends to pull some of that warmth out, and Taylor actually likes her brows a little more neutral. So I'm going to do light brown for 5 minutes on Taylor's brows, and we can actually mix our new Regen Next Gen into that tint so we don't have that extra step of that Regen conditioning time. So that's what I'll do. We have a whole separate video about how to mix the Regen in with our tints or with the setting lotion. You can do either one. I typically opt to mix it with the tint. Just makes more sense for me and how I do things, but you can do either way. I'll post the link to that video on our YouTube channel in the comments below when we're finished, so you can check that out if you want to, and get like the full details on all the different ways you can use the Regen Next Gen. So I'm going to go ahead and remove her cling wrap from this right brow and get ready to go in there with my dry Q-tips, and then you can finish it with one damp Q-tip to really remove any of that lotion from her brow area. And again, I'm just gently removing, kind of rolling over the brow in the direction of hair growth. And they look fantastic. And then I would go over with one damp Q-tip right in here. Same thing, just really gently. Make sure I'm getting any of that excess lotion or any remaining lotion off the hairs. Some other things we haven't yet talked about that I do want you to know is we don't encourage trimming the brows, definitely not before lamination, because it can leave some blunt edges in the brows and kind of make them look a little funky and not shaped how you want them. And typically we don't like to do a whole lot of trimming afterwards either. Maybe if you have some crazy brows coming out, like those really wiry ones, you might want to trim those down. But as this lamination begins to kind of relax over the next 6 weeks, and as you get new brow hair growth in there, you don't want those trim brows to fall at really awkward angles and look choppy throughout the brow. So we want to be careful of that. Some other things that we do and do not recommend within Elleebana brow lamination is you don't want to immediately go in with wax, sugar, threading, anything like that the same day as a brow lam. It can just make the skin a little too sensitive after we've done this chemical process. So ideally you want to space out any kind of brow shaping other than some minor tweezing if you have some major strays. You want to space that out about 48 hours. So Taylor still has about 1 minute left on this left eyebrow before we apply the tint. I am going to go ahead and mix up my tint. Again, I'm using this Elleebana Profusion light brown tint on Taylor, and mixing it with my region and my oxidant. And if you guys have any additional questions, be sure to go ahead and drop them in the comments below, and I'll check them all out at the end of the video so I can try to answer them all before we jump off the live today. Or like I said at the beginning, if you think of them afterwards, you can always leave them on here. Kelly and I both check the group every single day so we can answer your questions and try to be as helpful as possible when it comes to the Elleebana product, any kind of product support or any kind of training. And that's what we're here for. Okay, so you're gonna get your tint mixed up into about this kind of consistency. So when I'm mixing the Region Next Gen into my tint, I'm doing 8 parts tint and 1 part Region. So just a teeny tiny little small drop of Region is all you need. And that really comes down to about 4 parts tint, 4 parts oxidant, 1 part Region. All right, and so now it's time to remove that lotion from Taylor's left brow. Go ahead and take the cling film off. Come in here first with my dry Q-tips. And this one turned out beautifully as well. And then you can go over it with one damp Q-tip. You don't want to fully saturate the brows. We want to avoid trying to get them wet for the first 48 hours. Okay, and then you could go back over with one dry one if you needed to as well. All right, so her lamination process is finished. It's complete, looks fantastic. I could even brush through them one more time if I needed to, just check them out. And so now I'm going to go into applying her tint. And for Taylor today, I'm not necessarily looking for a darker color because that dark brown really kind of stuck to her brows, but I do want to try to neutralize any of that warmth that pulls through and kind of pick up some of those blonder brow hairs. So today I am using this doe foot applicator. You can use an angle brush. You could even use the mixing stick that you mix tint with. You could use a disposable mascara wand or one of those Wonder Wands. Whatever works for you for tint, go for it. And just like I did with the lotion, I'm going to clean up kind of some of this excess I have going on right there. And I'm going to set my timer and let that develop for 5 minutes each side. Everything's still feeling okay, Taylor? Yes. Perfect. And for your brows to look as fullest as possible, you do want to make sure you're applying that tint all the way from the root to the tip of the hair. A lot of people like to go darker, a little bit heavier with the tint on the tails of the brows here, and maybe a little bit lighter at the head of the brow. Completely up to you what your client wants and how you prefer to do your tint application. Okay, and I'm just about a minute behind on that left brow with the tint. So in this time, while your tint's developing, you could just clean up your station, make sure any trash is thrown away, out of the way. Kind of make it easy for you to turn over for your next client. The whole process of a brow lamination and tint really only takes about 40-45 minutes with cleanup from start to finish. If you want to add a really thorough consultation in there, you might want to add a little more time and make it an hour service, but generally it's a pretty short, quick service. So her right brow has about 3 more minutes to process here. Make sure I have all my stuff out of the way. And then for tint, we don't have to add that cling wrap. We're just gonna let that sit right there on the brows. Let me check and see if you guys have any other questions you've put in the comments. Turn the slide down. Let's see here. Okay, Lisa already answered that question. Perfect. So if y'all have any other questions about the brow lamination or tinting process, make sure you drop them here because we're almost done. She has just about 2.5 minutes left before we remove the tint. And for the tint removal, I'm just gonna go in with some dry Q-tips, and then you could follow it with another damp Q-tip as well. Sarah said, did I hear you say don't tweeze until 48 hours after? You can tweeze the day of. Basically what we want to avoid is like any excess friction or irritation on the skin, because with the brow lamination, our lotions are touching the skin in some sort of way, right? Because our brow hairs are laying directly on our skin, not like our lashes. So tweezing's okay, but to do like a full brow shaping, if you're using soft wax, hard wax, sugar, threading, anything like that, we want to wait 48 hours before or after. I would prefer to do it after, just because a lot of times with the brow lamination, you're really kind of reshaping their brows all together. So it's hard to tell prior what hairs you actually want to remove and what you want to leave there. So I would personally prefer to do it 48 hours after. Or you could have your client on like a nice little routine. If they come in every 6 weeks for their brow lamination, maybe they come in like 2 weeks after for a brow shaping, or in between 3 weeks after for a brow shaping. So you're seeing them like every 3 weeks, if that makes sense. But whatever works for you and your clientele, you just want to make sure you're not over irritating their skin. So let me reposition this back down and tailor. It's almost time to remove that tint, so I'm going to go ahead and get my Q-tips ready. And so as far as supplies go for the brow lamination, all I've used is, of course, my Elleeplex Profusion sachets. I prefer, and this is just personal preference, I prefer to use the doe foot or lip gloss applicator and the Wonder one, and you can find both of those on Panoply Beauty. I use a 2-in-1 mixing tray. And then I use the Elleebana Brow Lamination Wrap for my cling wrap for the lamination processing steps. Other than that, I use the Elleebana Makeup Remover and then the tint, whatever tint you're gonna opt for, and some Q-tips, cotton rounds, and that's about it. Pretty cut and dry. So most of everything I am going to be able to throw away and toss after this, which again, I already know I said it, but I greatly appreciate if you have a packed schedule. I know that makes it easier if you have more disposables, especially if they're at a lower price point. Just because sanitizing and disinfecting all those tools in between clients does take up time. Time is money. So really all I'm cleaning and disinfecting, I did use this little tint bowl, but I could have just as easily wiped out this mixing dish and mixed my tint here and just had this to clean in between clients. Okay, so we're at our mark. I'm gonna go ahead and start removing the tint. And that turned out perfectly, the color that I was going for. And you can see these Elleeplex Profusion tints are really, really beautiful. The colors are really spot on. For some of your more neutral or cooler colors, you're gonna opt for light brown. Dark brown can kind of pull either way, just depending on their undertones of their hair. And then of course graphite. You can mix a little graphite in to cool down any color. Some of your warmer colors are gonna be honey brown. Again, dark brown can go either way. And you can mix a little auburn in with anything to warm it up a little bit. Okay, so that's the first brow. We can go ahead and go over here to her other brow and remove it. You'll also see people just wiping off with 4x4 or dry cotton round, which is perfectly acceptable. I just find I'm a little too messy to do that, so I like using my Q-tips. Alright, I want to make sure whatever I'm using is coming clean, that there's no tint still on the skin. Our tint is not intended to really stain the skin. If that's what you're going for, you're going to want to look more to our henna line, some henna training. And as far as doing brow henna and lamination, it's more ideal to space those out 2 weeks apart. You don't want to do a henna and lamination on the same day because it can be over drying to the skin. So you can see Taylor's brows look fantastic. They're nice and full. Let me try to take my phone off so I can kind of give you guys a closer view of her brows. Let's see here. Okay. Oh. It's gonna let me. So her brows look really, really great. Okay, if you guys have any final questions, let me just go through here and make sure I answered them all. All right, I think I got them all. So if you do have any other questions, like I said, just drop them in the comments, or you can email me at paige@panoplybeauty.com, and I will always get back to you really quickly. I hope this demo was helpful, and let me know what you guys would like to see for another live sometime soon. Have a great week, and let me know what you think about the Elleeplex Profusion Brow Lamination.